What up, though? I am Jay the Gentleman. That's at JAI the Gentleman on IG. And welcome to Dear Black Gay Men Live. It's still our short, bullshit-free step out of our comfort zone to talk about all the emotional ups and downs along the journey to happiness. Now, we're having real conversations with real people live on the Dear Black Gay Men YouTube channel. Tonight, we're talking about a topic that I think we all need a little bit more of. It's our last show of 2022, and Hakim Asadi is my guest. He's a counselor, social worker, speaker, educator, and a spiritualist. I'll ask him what that means. His practice is called Beyond Living, and he joins me today to talk about closure. Welcome, Hakim. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
So good. What is a spiritualist?
It's a funny story. My friends and I, we were looking for something to kind of coin that because spirituality is something that I incorporate in my practice. And so I wanted to use a word that was all encompassing for that exploration. So a spiritualist is someone I think that is just open to spirit and wants to have the conversation, is willing to have a space or create the space for you to explore what that looks like. I grew up in church, so I have a very connected context, if that makes sense. Like the context of my spiritual journey has been in church. And so while I don't want to put people in church in the practice, we definitely use language around spirituality.
Why do you feel like that spiritual didn't fit that? Like being a spiritualist versus just saying you're spiritual or Christian or any other word. Why didn't those work?
I think spiritualist speaks to someone practicing spirituality. Okay. So in other words, I incorporate spirit in everything that I do. My life, my morning routine. So it's not just Christianity. So I wouldn't want to pigeonhole myself in a way that limits me. And so if I come across a book around Buddhism, I'm interested in reading it. What can I take from that and incorporate it in my life that I don't feel like I'm doing a disservice to my spiritual walk, but it's actually adding value. So to me, a spiritualist is someone who practices spirituality.
Okay. I feel that. So I do another podcast called Black Light Matters. And my co-host, his name is Ra, and he has he creates all kind of words that I just love in how his brain works. But he calls it a relatingship instead of a relationship. Because he wants to talk about how he wants the word to lend itself to how being in relationship is a action. It's not a thing. It's it's a verb, it's not a noun.
Mhm.
And it sounds similar to what you're saying, that a spiritualist is, it has action behind it, right? It has practice. Is
Yes.
it, am I understanding that?
Yes.
I got it. I got it.
Nice.
So the funny thing is, you actually inspired like most of all of this.
Really?
Yes. You may not remember, or you probably do remember because it wasn't that long ago, but I was going to apply for everybody else. I was going to apply for this grant to do all of these things. And I did not get it, which probably was the biggest blessing of my life. And so
Mm.
I talked about you in the grant application. And one thing that you said when I found out I didn't get it, you said, so you're going to keep going, right? And then you walked off. We're at the church. So you're going to keep going, right? And I said, I wasn't, but I guess I will now.
Hmm.
And bling, bling, bow. Look at all this.
Yeah. Well,
Look at
congratulations.
us. Which is one of the reasons why I wanted to talk to you about this particular topic, because closure has come up in my life in so many different ways. But before we get to that, I want to make sure everyone uh hits the share button. Share this live to your timeline. I would love to hit 50 shares on this episode. Hit the like button on Facebook and the thumbs up on YouTube. When you're here for a good time, not a long time. So make sure you are subscribed to Dear Black Gay Men on YouTube so you never miss a thing. This is Hakim's second time talking to me. The first was during my bout with COVID. I had a short conversation with you, Hakim, about a whole bunch of stuff, and you dropped this little nugget of knowledge. Check this out.
If we break down loneliness, that's just being alone with unwanted emotions. Sad, unhappy. Go ahead.
Light bulbs just went off. Loneliness is being alone with unwanted emotions. Like, did that just come up to you off the top of your head?
Just,
That is so fucking good. Loneliness is just being alone with unwanted emotions.
You say stuff like that all the time. Like, that's just your life. You just go around dropping nuggets like everywhere you go.
So I've heard.
Baby, what I tell you, that was so fucking good. Loneliness is being alone with unwanted emotions. So a couple things came up when I watched that back as we were putting together this episode. First, if I didn't know you, I would assume you're short.
Oh, really?
Cause you, I don't know, if it was the angle or the conversation. It just looked, I would just assume you're short. I've seen you in person, so I know you're not, but I would assume you're short. But the other thing is, you seem to always have it together.
Hmm.
Is that on par for being a counselor? Is there a pressure to like keep it together?
I actually don't think it has much to do with the counselor. I think it has more to do with how it was raised.
Mm-hmm.
And to a certain extent, it was a challenge, a problem, because I was so focused on the image. I was so focused on the presentation, and I didn't have an opportunity to address some of the internal things. But now that we've come into, doing the work, I'm more aware of it. And so it's not necessarily a posturing, but more of, this is really who I am.
So, like, one thing that I'm always curious about I talk to Bishop O.C. Allen, I've talked to pastors, I've talked to counselors and whatnot. I've been an HIV counselor myself. And what I'm always so curious about is like, how do you process, like, do the work? Everything I know about you is you helping others in the work. Like, how do you walk the walk? Like, who is the Hakim to you to help you to do the work?
So I'm a firm believer in having a supportive group chat.
Okay.
But
Yeah.
in addition to that, I have a therapist. I have someone that I work with on a regular basis to process my own stuff when I don't have it, or when I need additional support, or when I need an outside opinion.
Is there ever and I guess it kind of goes back to image. Is there ever just this notion, or does it ever feel like you have to not conceal, but do you feel as at liberty to talk about your journey, your trials, as I would as Joe Schmo? Like, do you ever feel like there is a barrier between what you can and can't say, or tell or whatnot, because you are somebody's Hakim?
I think it depends. I think in sessions, I'm mindful to not make it about me, but use my journey as an example. And so it's a quick example. I'm not taking up time or taking up space in a way that's inconvenient to the purpose of us being here. I'm here to support you, right? I can give you examples from my journey, but I'm not here, just spilling everything. And also it's very structured. Like, I know how and where and what I want to say that's going to add value versus me, again, taking over the conversation. So I think it depends. So if it's even in workshops or talking on platforms, I will always use myself as an example. My mother, she is fine with it now, but I used to use her as an example, still do, all the time, because she was a part of my journey, or she is a part of my journey. But I don't have an issue with using myself as an example. My professor in grad school shared that it's the professional use of self.
The professional use of self.
Yeah. So because I'm intentional about my journey, if something resonates, if we're in a session and you say something that it triggers a memory of mine, I will phrase questions that could help you process, because I process it. Not to say it's the same journey, not to say it's the same thing, but if you're talking about grief, I remember what grief feels like. I processed it. I know some tools, right? And so I'll ask a question to help you think about something based on the notes that I've taken on my journey.
And so how do you approach counseling when it's something that you have not gone through?
As far as someone who's interested in it?
No, like, you're in a session and you are talking to a client, a person, and it's a totally foreign feeling that they're going through and dealing with. How do you still engage in the work when you have no frame of reference about it?
I think asking questions, reflective questions, to give the space for them to think about it. So often we don't have the space to think about it. We don't actually move in that way. So we tend to suppress. And so in this space, here it is. Let's think about our thinking. Let's think about our emotions.
Think about our thinking.
And let's think about our behaviors. And then how do we want to show up? Is this something that's true to us, or is this something that we want to change?
You've done that for me several times, but you do it in passing. It's just so interesting to me how you can, like, walk up, drop a bombshell, and be like, "Oh, I'll talk to y'all later." Like, it's very interesting to watch when it happens to other people. Like, I remember one time I saw you talking to somebody, and you asked them, "What are you saying without saying it?" And I thought that was the most groundbreaking question ever. What are you saying without saying? And you just do this shit because that's how you communicate. And I started using that on my best friend. What are you saying without saying? And he'll be like, "Don't do that Hakeem shit with me." Like, he knows your name. It's fun to watch. It is fun.
Yes, I enjoy it as well.
Got it. So I recently talked about how I got closure from my on again, off again relationship with Joe on the Dear Black Gay Men podcast. I had invited him out to dinner with the intention of rekindling whatever we were doing. But before we got that far, we had a phone conversation. Check this out. And he was so gracious in the conversation. He told me some things that I needed to hear and some things that I didn't need to hear. We talked about why we're not together. Why does he think we're not together? And the funny thing is, we had the exact same reason why we're not together now, only it was the other person. He felt like there were some things that I did the last time we tried that turned him off, and I felt like there were some things he did the last time we tried that had turned me off. Before the conversation, I thought I needed to I still had those feelings, but I thought he had grown out of them. And then he said something to me. I'm not going to tell you what he said, but then he said something to me that stung a little bit. Now, I call what I got out of that conversation closure. Because in my spirit, I felt resolved. But what, on a more professional level, because you are the professional, what is closure?
Closure is, I'm trying to think of the words to kind of put it together. There's so many. I'll do it like this. The first word that comes to my mind is clarity. And seeking clarity or looking for clarity or that resolve that you said that you got. And so when we don't have closure, we're often confused or it's unclear or it's lingering or something. It's not a clear cut thing. And so while that might not be the clinical phrasing or the framework, that's the first word that comes to my mind is like this seeking of clarity or like a cutoff or a tie off or something.
In all the conversations that I've had about closure, a lot of people, I think, really believe that closure comes from the other person. Closure comes from external. Is that the case? Like, is that where you get closure from?
Not always. Probably no. I think closure, I think when we have this desire to be clear and it's the expectation is coming from the external, where's that power? Who's harnessing that power? The person, and it's in that moment it's on the external because I'm having a struggle with moving forward or moving on or closing that chapter, if you will, because I'm waiting for something to happen on the external. When I'm a firm believer in how do I hone and pull in or call in my own power? My own power is, let me evaluate this situation. I probably got closure a long time ago based on somebody's behavior. And I just didn't chuck it up to their behavior. I wanted somebody to tell me that they were over me. I wanted somebody to tell me that they no longer wanted to see me. But all the while, their behavior was very telling that, child, they don't want you.
So with this particular person, with Joe, I call him Joe. That is not his name. But I think that the hard part about closure is just like an apology. Like I want to hear it from them so I know it's real. Like I want closure so both of us are on the same page. But oftentimes we ain't on the same page, are we? Doc, I call you Doc, but I shouldn't say that because you're not a doctor yet. I'm calling that into existence. But we want to be on the same page, bro. Why can't we just? How do we overcome the need to hear it from the other person? I think that's the better question.
I think the better question is, why do you need to hear it from this person? Why do you need them to tell you or to just verbally say whatever it is that you're looking for?
Because it feels good. Because that in my head, what comes to mind is that is the closure. Is that inappropriate?
I think it's appropriate for your journey. Sometimes we may need that, and after a while, we'll get to the point where we understand that that's not necessary. I can accept something for what it is at the moment that it is.
I don't know that a lot of us are doing that.
But that's the journey, right? Everybody's on their own journey. That requires work, that requires intention, that requires consciousness and awareness of. They have told me without saying it, whatever it is, right? When you heard him say that, it's something that you knew already internally. I think when we look for these external things, we do a mishandling of our spirit. We
Talk about that.
We do a mishandling of our intuition because your gut knew that.
So then the question that I have is, how do we then start listening to our gut? Because what you're saying is gut was telling me, if I am the proxy for all of our viewers, gut was telling me XYZ. Mm-hmm. And our vulnerable moment, I definitely wasn't listening to it. But how do you get more aligned with gut, spirit, consciousness?
I think first we slow down. We slow down because we have to be able to listen to it. And in slowing down, that can look like literally slowing down. Because some of us are out here busy working and hustling and partying and brunch after brunch and all these other things. And much of that is serving as a distraction from our own internal being. We got to get to know our internal being. So slowing down and spending time with yourself. That exact clip, right? We talked about that in that same recording. Loneliness, right? Sometimes I don't like being alone because one, that it brings up unwanted emotions, but then I also I don't like myself.
You said that in the other one too, yeah.
I can't sit with myself. And so it's difficult to sit with myself because I have to address all these things that are inside, which brings me to a point where I'm looking for closure on the external. Because if I think about what my internal being was telling me, I would have to address the pain that brings. I would have to address that I knew this for a long time, but I wanted it to be different.
I wanted it to be different. I think a lot of us want a lot of things in our lives to be different. Mm-hmm. What I just heard in my head was there's a book called The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle. Mm-hmm. And he talks about, and I talked about this on Black Lives Matters. He talks about everything in life happens in a now. Mm. There is past and present are in our head. Everything in life is happening in a version of a now. Mm-hmm. But the hard part about becoming so now focused is, how do you marry that with my desires? What if I really want this man that I don't have closure from? What if I really want this thing that is not? How do I overcome the wanting enough to listen to what is?
How do I overcome the wanting enough to listen to what is? How do I overcome the wanting to listen to what is? I think in those moments, what are you focused on? We're focused on a desire that the question is, will it come true? Because I want this person, but they don't want me for whatever reason. It doesn't even matter at this point. It's just we're not on the same page. Mm-hmm. Right? And so I'm focused on wanting this rather than what is right now. How do I hone in on what is right now? I think this is where self-love comes in, because as you were talking, self-worth came to my mind. Why do we find ourselves in these perpetual situationships where we want somebody so bad, but they don't want us? And transparent moment, I had a moment recently where I missed somebody. So an idea of a relationship, a fantasy future of this person. And I think something came up on my timeline, and in a moment I missed that person. And I had to sit with that. This is the work. I had to sit with that missing of the person, the missing of the idea of the person. And I had to address why it didn't work out. I didn't need to call. I didn't need to FaceTime. I didn't need to send that letter. I didn't need to do all that. I needed to really sit with myself and think about what was missing, what I felt like was missing in the connection, what I felt like I missed from the future story that I had created, that fantasy that I had created, and realize what reality was saying. reality then and now. I felt like I was begging to have communication. I don't beg people to have a conversation. You crazy?
That's what you just got a little New York right there. I just saw it. You just got a little New York right there. Okay, I see you, Hakim
But
Asadi.
the point is, I'm not that person. And so for me to keep reaching out and getting left on red and hearing the excuses that excuse that behavior, but I'm not that person, right? So I had to recognize that I did a lot of work on my self-worth, and there was something missing here. It was a gap missing that I then was, with my own ideas and thoughts and imaginations, was filling in that gap to make it make sense. But if I were to sit back, that closure, because I had to bring it to a close, that closure that I was looking for, I had to realize that this gray area, this confusion has its own frequency. And it's not in alignment to the wholeness that I'm looking for in a relationship.
Low vibrations.
So either way, this isn't it.
You know what is interestingly comforting about everything you just said is when I talk to people who are professionals in their life, a lot of times I'm talking to them about the destination that they've arrived in their journey, and hearing that there is still a journey, there's a way forward, there's stuff that you, the counselor, are working on. For me, that is interestingly comforting. Just the idea that you are not I say you, like professionals, can acknowledge and be candid and vulnerable about their journey. That's dope. That's dope to me.
Yeah, I think I'm a firm believer in vulnerability, and that's how we connect.
So one question I do have about closure is, what's the difference between closure and just moving on?
I think there's a difference between ignoring and addressing something. Moving on sounds like it's more towards ignoring it. Because if we move on, and in the framework of ignoring it, if we see that person or somebody brings that name up or something, how do we then talk about it? How do we then, what emotions are we triggered by this conversation? So then that bears the question, did we really move on? Did we really close that chapter? Did we really close that door? I think closure is that practice of understanding that I may not get the response, or I may not get the apology. I may not get these things. And so how do I reconcile that within myself of the pain or the issues or the challenges or the wounds? How do I heal these things without this person being present? Because they may not have the tools or the capacity to add value to that journey.
Okay. I receive that.
Mm-hmm.
What came to mind, but what did, but what did come up is a lot of people, I would imagine, when they talk about closure, they're talking about relationship closure. And relationships, good ones, I think, if they don't go as you thought they should, hurt a little bit. And so how long is it okay to, sit with that pain before you got to move on?
I don't know if I can give somebody a timeline. I don't think that's efficient for your journey. I think putting it into practice and being mindful that this is a journey and that you want to seek that closure, you want to seek that healing, I think that's important. It could be years, it could be a week, it could be whatever you need. I was talking to a friend, and I think we were in meditation, and we were just like talking about manifestation. And what came to me was, it happens as fast as you believe it. It happens as fast as you come into alignment and really believe, like, okay, this is what's true. And not focused on the pain and the hurt and the what's missing. I think that's when we mess up, or there's a misstep there, because that's what we rehearse in our minds. And so then that's what we create. That's what we feel. But if I look at it and say, I'm on the journey of healing, and stay true to that, I practice and process the wounds, the hurt, the pain, and not necessarily judge it, but processing it. Because we talked about this before, emotions are energy in motion. The minute we start holding on to it and rehearsing it, we're literally rehearsing it. And so processing it, I think, is important to your journey.
But how do you know that you're processing as opposed to commiserating?
The outcome and the intention. Because if I'm just rehearsing and stewing and commiserating, then it's like going in a circle, right? But if I'm processing, I'm looking at it and I'm on the journey. There's movement, there's healing. And so it could be conversations about your ex, right? Speak on myself. Conversations now are conversations. I'm not triggered. I'm not trying to mask like the hurt and pain that I'm feeling. I can actually have a conversation and it be that. That to me speaks to, and that gives evidence to processing it and journeying. Whereas before, I might not tell the person, but in my mind, I'm like, oh, I want to hear more. Or what's the real tea? Or realizing like, oh, I miss him. And replaying fantasies and dreams and other things. Now it's a conversation.
So I do want to ask, and I hope I don't get too personal here, but shifting gears a little bit, it seems as if, outsider looking in, you got to be one pretty self-aware person to date you. It's like you got to step your pussy all the way up to step to Hakim Asadi. Is that the case? Like,
yes, I think, but I say it like this. I think it's important for everybody to be self-aware.
Right.
Because in a particular romantic relationship or a personal, even friends, personal relationship, I have a tendency to call things out or invite you to awareness in a particular way. And so you might get tired of that. I'm going to get tired of that. So, yeah, I think practicing closure, right? Transparency. I think 2023, the question that I will ask in my mind for personal and romantic or whatever is, do you want to be well? I find myself in friendships and in whatever relationships where people talk to me and they're getting advice and I'm talking, so it doesn't matter. It's just who I am, right? But after a while, it's like, well, you're not doing nothing.
That is hilarious to me.
The question is, do you want to be well? And if you do, there's several resources that I can practice. I can talk about my journey. I want to sit as the witness and not ever sit as the judge, because then it crosses over into me judging, and I don't want to be in that place.
So the reason why I ask is because I am a professional in sex. People would say, not necessarily having, but I talk about it a lot, and people just assume that you got to be like some super freak in order to date me. And I just wonder, do people have to be? The question was based on, do people have to be like enlightened, like Gandhi, to be like, oh, me and Hakim are a thing?
I don't think so. I think you just have to be open to it. You might not be there, right? But just be open to it. And I think having a healthy relationship, like I'm in a relationship now, and what I have to reflect on is like a healthy relationship is open to communicating. There's we even if we're not fully self-aware, because I might have a blind spot, right? But I'm talking about it. I'm airing it out and I'm processing it out loud or by myself, and then I bring it to the table. I think it's important to have someone, for me, in friendship and romantic relationship, where the defenses aren't there. And if they are there, we can talk about it. Like, I'm feeling defensive. okay, so let's pause and we'll come back to it, because my intention is never to harm you. And so in my relationships, I don't want to ever question if you are going to harm me.
So I had just had a experience of that.
Mhm.
Not the harm part, but being able to call an emotion as it's happening. So the other day, well, not the other day, this was months ago, but I was going to see my niece because I have a brand spanking new niece. She's only 4 months old, but when I first met her, I was going over there and I thought it was going to be a normal situation. And then I walked up into their bedroom, I opened the door, and I looked at her beautiful little newborn face, and I was getting like the ugly cry was coming. It was like so
Mhm.
up, and I was about, and then I was able to just say, I'm emotional right now. And then from that space, I can say, well, do I want to be emotional? Do I not want to be emotional? Do I want to cry? Like, I can make a decision about what I want to do.
You
And
can make a decision.
I can
You
make
get
a
to make the
decision.
decision.
I can make a decision. Now, in that instance, I actually did want to cry because it was appropriate, but I also have done the same thing when I was like, I'm pissed off right now. What do I want to do about that? I want to beat
Uh-huh.
this bitch with a bottle. I didn't,
Uh,
luckily enough.
again, a choice.
I,
Here's
I
the
wish I would have
work.
made a different choice for this particular fight, but I get it.
The work is, and the invitation is for us to be aware and make those conscious decisions. Play and be that active participant in your own life, because so often the fear makes decisions for us.
Yeah. Yeah. There you go, dropping more bombshells. That was good. Let's take a break. We'll be right back. What up, though? I am Jay the Gentleman. You've been enjoying Dear Black Gay Men podcast. Now we're premiering our new show. It's Dear Black Gay Men Live, and it's live streamed every week on our YouTube channel. We talk sex, love, relationships, culture with real people every Tuesday at 9 p.m. Eastern. Then the podcast is still new every Wednesday. You can download the new episode of Dear Black Gay Men podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Play, or wherever you get your podcasts. And Thursdays, Ra the Wizard and I are still live for Black Light Matters right here on our YouTube channel. I am Jay the Gentleman, and I'll see you on Dear Black Gay Men on YouTube. Every episode of Dear Black Gay Men Live, I ask my guests a question from tonight's conversation cards. Are you ready, Hakim?
Sure.
I tried to be more professional because I respect you. I mean, not that I talk to people I don't respect, but I respect you. So yours is different. But tonight's conversation cards are the question deck that invoke stimulating, deep, and tantalizing conversation. It's perfect to set the atmosphere for a first date, a third date, or even when you're already in a relationship, as Hakim just told us he is. Hakim, your question comes from the Essential First Date Icebreakers deck. Are you ready for it?
Sure.
What qualities are you looking for in a partner?
Ooh. The first word that comes to my mind is willingness.
What do you mean by that?
Willingness, I got it from Bell Hooks, her book, All About Love. And the willingness, she talks about the willingness of, like, how I interpreted it was, I'm not guessing if we're in this together.
Ooh,
Like,
that's good.
there's a particular showing up that I appreciate, that we're not guessing, we're not playing games, we're not we just know that we're here together. And I didn't realize I needed that until after reading the book. Right. So that the point that I was talking about, missing the person, there wasn't a willingness. I was guessing if this person wanted to be with me. And so I'm like, child, no. And so it's stuff like that. The books, the reading, and that kind of give me insight on, oh, I can close this myself. And so in dating and on a first impressions or whatever, I want to know if you're willing to do this with me.
How do you gauge that?
Time.
Is it a feeling? Is it a word? Is it like, how do you know?
I think it's time, and not conflating emotional and emotional awareness and emotional willingness. Because someone can be emotionally aware, but not willing to talk about it.
So if I'm hearing you correctly, it's I'm emotionally aware. I know what I'm feeling when I'm feeling it, but I don't share that with you, my dating person.
Correct.
That's what you're saying.
Correct. And I think that comes with time. That comes with conversation. That comes with, I mean, because we're emotional beings, right? So are you vulnerable? Are you willing to share and talk and actually practice vulnerability, or is the conversation surface level? Or can I identify that you're suppressing something? Or can I identify that you are posturing, you're hiding something, you're whatever. And so oftentimes you're listening for what's not being said, right? And
what are you saying without saying it? That's a
Exactly.
Hakimism. Okay.
So in those moments, I can gauge your level of willingness.
That's dope. Usually I'm pretty good with a question, clearly, but somehow or another you keep getting me these moments where I'm just like, well, we can end the show right there. I could have ended this 30 minutes ago. we can end the show right there. Willingness. I think that is the reason why that resonated with me is because I think there just is something in our culture that meaning Black gay culture. I think there is something in Black gay culture that I've experienced, at least, that just says I need to have everything together all the time because you don't want to get read, right? And from that space, I would imagine, I think, I know, I feel that it's really hard to be willing because the undercurrents, the underpinnings of having it together is I got it together. I got it. I got this. So the idea that I'm willing to evolve into something else undermines that.
But I mean, I think that to me speaks to practicing that vulnerability with yourself.
Yeah.
Because you can, right? You can seem like you have it together. You want to present that, especially on your first date, right? You want to present that, but understanding that I don't have it together, right? I want to evolve. I want to grow, and sharing that, expressing that, and not allowing that fear to make that decision for you. Because how often do we miss out on a good thing because of fear? I don't want to take that risk. I don't want to take that risk of being clowned or being read or whatever. And so I don't show up. I present my ideal self, and you get a presentation. Here's the challenge, because we find ourselves dating based on our ideal self. And then after a while, 4 months, 6 months, we get exhausted because I'm presenting something that I can't sustain. It's not sustainable.
That literally was, I spent 2 years with somebody doing that. Now, granted enough, I don't think I had as good a concept of who I am as I do now, obviously, because I was a much younger version of myself. But I didn't even know that there was a self underneath all of this posturing. And then I met Hakim Asadi, and I was like, oh, all is well with the world. All is well with the world. Hakim, thank you so much for joining me today on this episode of Dear Black Gay Men Live.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Of course. You're always good for a conversation. I will say that.
Thanks.
Always good for a conversation. I want to thank you for joining me. For more information on counseling services at Beyond Living, Hakim's practice, you can visit hakimasadi.com. The link is in the description of the live. Hakim, it's always a pleasure.
Thank you. Yes, always a pleasure. We have good conversation.
I'm glad, because I kind of have a podcast, so I would hope that it's good for a conversation.
Yes.
Until next time. For everyone, that was our show. I am Jay the Gentleman. If you liked this episode, make sure you thumbs up on YouTube, like on Facebook, and share it. Subscribe to Dear Black Gay Men on YouTube, and I will talk to you all next week. Bye.